Saturn in the 3rd degree of Pisces, a petrified forest. The long-term reach of social movements. If we look at historical or especially geological periods of time as individuals, typically we are rather unimpressive. Yet collectively we co-create our culture and participate in getting that culture to make its mark upon its time and place. Thousands of years later, there are still enough clues from which we can infer the essential aspects of ancient cultures. This shows that it is impossible completely to destroy the effects of something that has once had life. Records exist of social events that occurred long ago. What is important endures. We read between the lines to infer whatever we cannot fully know. Standing firm or projecting forward, do we fear or do we trust? The implication being that we can trust. We can trust that whatever we do now that has significance will leave its mark. Individually, that might not add up to very much. Very few individuals really make a difference to history, and when we look back we come up with some heroes, very often people with knives and guns, possibly creative skills, but the individual doesn't really get celebrated quite as much as the culture. In other words, individually we are part of something bigger, which assuredly will have duration. And that gives us a sense of trusting the meaning of our lives, trusting that what we're doing now is contributing. And that's not a small thing. If we're aware that even in our own small way, as part of something bigger, nonetheless, we are contributing to something which has permanence, then that gives meaning in a way that we would not otherwise claim it. Saturn is in that degree now. So this whole idea of doing something now which will last for thousands of years in its echo, in its mark, Saturn there, that's supportive of that, isn't it? That's a Saturn-like thing because it has long times and duration and endurance and the things that Saturn likes to talk about. That's implied here. So what we're doing now is measured by Saturn to have a long-term longevity, a duration stretching into the future, culturally speaking, collectively speaking. So let's put our head forward 5,000 years when people are looking back on this period of history, the birth of computers, for example. That would be a remarkable time. That would be one of these events that we're currently looking back on, such as the agricultural revolution or the industrial revolution. We don't actually know exactly when they started, unlike this computer revolution. I don't know what will be the name of our new era. It might be the computer era, who knows? But most assuredly, that's the biggest technological statement of my lifetime. Computers didn't exist and now they do, and that's changed the mentality of our species. It's not a small thing, it's huge, and it's given rise to the possibility of artificial intelligence, with all the horror stories that you can imagine to do with that, and all of the benefits that you can imagine to do with that. If we go back to the other revolutions, the Industrial Revolution took people away from the arduous full-time work of living on the land, subsistence farming, just getting enough to feed yourself and your family in some cases, and took people into an easier way, albeit the factories don't represent the easiest way of being, but compared to farming, most assuredly they did. The standard of living exploded because of industrialization and the possibility, therefore, of the division of labor. We each did what we were good at and create surpluses from that. We became inordinately wealthy because of the Industrial Revolution. And that was nothing compared to the difference between the Agricultural Revolution and hunter-gatherers, who were very much in danger of death all of the time until they learned to grow their own food. But that, of course, gave rise to having to protect your own food and being able to enslave people. So each of these developments has its own downside. And here we have the computer development with its very severe penalty that we've dumbed down our intelligence levels, collectively speaking, and our way of speaking to each other has degenerated as well. So that most assuredly will be a part of what we remember in future. And on the other side, there will be the birth of consciousness of our environment. There wasn't quite as much said about climate change before computers. And there was an opportunity through the development of social media to have everyone's voice heard. Even people saying silly things in a very negative, hurtful way, they are allowed to speak up. Even the unbeautiful expression of sexuality through pornography, that was given its place. And people were given opportunities to travel through Airbnb and so on and so forth. Huge amounts of social shifting has occurred. Now, we're in the middle of that without knowing really what's happening. We're right in the middle of this storm that human consciousness is going through, and we just don't know what's going on. We really don't. We try to explain it, and yet we won't find an explanation that will please an astrologer or an historian 5,000 years from now. The astrologer is going to look back at this time and say, well, this was one of the examples when Pluto went into Aquarius, and there have been 20 more, in the time since. And we see that there's a trend happening in the Aquarius age. There was computers and there were social consciousness, and then, there'd be that aspect. We're part of an astrological waveform, which is very slow indeed, with one cycle taking a quarter of a millennium. That's part of what we're doing right now. Another part of what we're doing is we're awakening into the age of Aquarius. This is perhaps 2,160 year cycle, the last of which was related to Christ, the previous one to the hero gods, the Aries type experience, the previous one to that, to the ploughing of the fields with a bull and developing agriculture, and the previous one to that, sailing on ships to go and trade and travelling around Gemini kind of conversations and languaging and writing and that kind of thing. And before that, the Cancer era and so on, which had the matriarchy and tribalization. And, so we can see very slow vibrations, and we're in one right now. This is the dawning of the age of Aquarius, according to the 60s song, and it's the time when Pluto is going into Aquarius. And I think that has to be noticed. But as we talk about this movement of Pluto into Aquarius, the age of Aquarius is going to become very much clearer to us. Now, all of this is when Saturn is going through Pisces, 3rd degree, and Saturn is saying, well, what is your mark? What are you actually doing that will have a physical effect on the here and now, and will contribute to the cultural effect that will be measured in historical cycles? And if you think, well, I'm just so small, I don't think I can make a difference, well, then you're belittling yourself unnecessarily. I think you could be encouraged to think, I'm as important as anyone else, and it may be that my comment, my mark, my creative output just happens to be the thing that needs to be said right now. And it might trigger something else that will trigger something else. And tiny little things become huge movements. And if we actually, all of us, take that approach, that what I do now matters, and perhaps it matters in the context of history. I don't know, I can't know, we can't know, but what we do know is that there's something to do here to represent your corner, and your corner is that you prefer a healthy environment to what the money people seem to want, and your corner is that you prefer a life lived in love and harmony and beauty, compared to the other industrialists that like building ugly things and having no sense of decency towards their slave workers. You know, you've got your own angle on life. Well, speak up about it. Make your mark. Do something. And if you don't, then why not? Why don't you care enough to do something? And if you just do something and let somebody else know what you've done, they might add to that, they might spin that, they might place that in somebody's attention, and that might actually have an effect. If we all think of ourselves as having that long-term consequence to our lives, then that's the kind of confidence we need to make our mark,